traditionally been using as currency, underground currency in jail, but times are changing. These ramen noodles are now the hot ticket item inside US prisons. According to a new study, the researchers say the shift comes in response to a decline in the quantity and quality of food on offer, with a pack of noodles now more in demand than a pack of cigarettes. This one in particular, Shin Ramen Noodle Soup. In fact, it's known as soup. Let's speak to Samantha Olson, who joins us from New York, a health journalist who wrote an article about her experience following the diet of the US Federal Bureau of Prisons certified menu. Is this really true?
Hi, Tim. Yes, it's absolutely true. I followed the diet for 5 days, and I was subjected to eat a lot of white bread and a lot of foods that just don't generally fill you up, empty calories. And so I can understand why prisoners would want to turn to ramen noodles as a high-calorie option that's tasty. But these ramen noodles, they are high saturated fats, they are high in salt, they have food additives that are just not good for them. So we're also putting prisoners in a bad position by forcing them to want to choose these kinds of food items.
Oh, okay, Samantha, stay with us, because I think we can speak to Gustavo Alvarez in Baja, California, an ex-prisoner and author of the book Prison Ramen. I'm not making this up. Recipes and stories from behind bars. Gustavo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Very, very well. So this has overtaken tobacco and even drugs, has it, in prison?
Yeah, you know, that actually has been going on for years. It's just now coming to light. People are starting to be more aware of it. But this has been going on since the 70s, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm.
And is that because prison food is just so awful that you're not getting, you can't eat it?
Yeah, well, you know what? Prison food isn't as good as it used to be. Earlier in the early 90s, you would actually have kosher meals, and you'd have actual organic stuff, and even some vegetables we'd grow on our yards in between our barracks. But, you know, they started cutting costs, and all these privatized prisons started opening up, so they started pinching pennies and taking out programs and cutting out money in our food supply. So we started being introduced to this new thing called tofu, or some type of fake meat and fake noodles and products. So, I mean, it's disgusting. You know, so a lot of us would go to dinner, lunch, whatever, and we'd bring back the actual meat, wash out the gravy with boiling water, and add them into our ramen recipes. And actually would be a better dinner or lunch, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, and Samantha, just explain there's this process called re-racking, which sounds pretty disgusting. Just explain what that is.
I was really shocked to find out when I interviewed Brendan Coster, who had been in the prison system for nearly 40 years. He said that they were using a re-rack system where they take the food and they refreeze it, food off of the tray that's already been eaten by other inmates and picked at, and then repurpose it within, and are allowed to feed the other inmates within 7 days that same frozen food from the week before. This company, Aramark, only a few months after I interviewed them, were investigated for this and found maggots within the food. Rats had eaten the desserts that inmates were eating. So it's also putting inmates at a sanitary disadvantage.
Okay, and all to try and get the cost down to $2 or $3 a day for inmates. Gustavo, where do guys buy then these noodles, and are there fights over noodles? I mean, you know, there are fights over tobacco and stuff like that. Do people get killed over these ramen noodles?
Actually, they do. There's a commissary store where you're allowed to go shopping once a month out of your account, and your account is basically your ID number. And you know, people could send you money orders into your account, and therefore you go to the commissary, give him your ID, and it's like a credit card. You swipe out whatever it is you want to buy, and you definitely purchase cases and cases of ramen there. Although some prisons have stopped that because they know that it's used as currency, gambling, and whatnot. So they allow you a couple cases an inmate. You know, but in other prisons, you're allowed to get as many as you want. And yeah, you know, you could tell the way a person is living by the types of ramen he has in his pantry or in his locker, however you want to call it. And yeah, you know, I've seen riots happen over unpaid debts with ramen, you know, and it caused riots, believe it or not, because it's not necessarily the noodle, but it's the principle, you know, and people need their money. And even if it's a few bucks, in prison, it's everything, you know?
I mean, curiously, Samantha, is this quite a good thing, actually? So instead of tobacco, which isn't good for anyone, as we all know, you know, these things are a healthy option in terms of currency.
So you're putting big tobacco against big food, I guess you could say. Well, to argue whether or not developing lung cancer is better or worse than developing colon cancer from eating high-saturated ramen noodles is definitely a tricky argument to navigate. But I would say eating these foods that are really bereft of a lot of nutrients is dangerous, and over time, and these prisons that are shaving pennies over time, accumulating dollars, they're also increasing the risk of type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease for these prisoners. So in the end, it's actually costing these prisons more money.
Yeah.
Last year it cost
than a healthy diet. Samantha, Gustavo, I'm sorry, we are out of time. Not even enough time to boil a packet of ramens.